We're going to jump straight into that router on a stick config as promised at the end of the last video. We've got our assignments, our IP addresses. Everything is set up on 2 and 4. We've verified our switch settings. So let's go ahead and dive into router 6 and hit this config. I'm going to create our sub interfaces first. And you see the little sub IF come in the prompt in the command prompt. Now we've got to do two things. We've got to give it the encapsulation command and then make sure it matches the trunking protocol, which we know is .1Q for this trunk. We verified that at the end of the last video. And then we've got to give it an IP address and we're good to go. So let's go ahead and give it an IP address. And again, we're going to use O/0.2 for VLAN 2. So we need to give it an address from that particular space. And we get a 3-line message. You know, that's never good. But actually this one is just telling us that configuring routing on a sub interface is only allowed if that sub interface is already configured as part of an IEEE 802.10, .1Q, or an ISL VLAN. That sounds like a complicated message. All this is telling you is you need to use the encapsulation command first. I told you when we were looking at the login and password thing that it almost never matters what order you put commands in, just as long as you get them all in. But in this case, it does matter with router on a stick. We've got to use the encapsulation command first. And our choice is .1Q, so that was a good choice. And then you've got to put your VLAN ID at the end. So that's going to be VLAN 2. And now we can use our up arrow to just repeat that same IP address command. And you're gold. We also got an interface fast00 change state to up command. So we're seeing that because we had it set up for a trunk on the other end. So now, 4, and we know we have to use the nkept command first, .1Q, followed by 4, because we're in VLAN 4. And IP address is going to be 172.12.4.6, 255.0. And that's it. See if we get another message here now. You can use the show interface command on logical sub-interfaces the same way you can our physical main interface. You're not going to get as much information, but do notice here, here's the encapsulation type we just configured, 802.1Q, and it's got a VLAN ID of 2. So you still have the same up and up message, and that's what we want to see. And before we go any further, we'll verify O.4. And so far, we are in good shape. So nothing complicated there at all. Now we need to start finding out if this baby's working or not. And I'm going to show you a great order of commands, because sometimes if this isn't working and our VLANs can't communicate, people don't quite know, where to get started. I'm going to show you exactly where to get started. And we're going to start with router 4. Router 4 should be able to ping 3 different destinations here. It should be able to ping its own default gateway. It should be able to ping R2's default gateway, or host 2's default gateway, I should say, and then it should be able to ping the other host itself, 172.12.2.2. Now, notice I mentioned a default gateway. This is the other thing people get a little confused on. It's very simple. When you go to these hosts, they've got to have a default gateway set, right? We have all the other values we give it, but it's got to have a default gateway, whether we manually configure it, give it to it by DHCP, however we get it there. The default gateway for a device and router on a stick needs to be the IP address from its address space that is configured on the router. Don't look at any IP addresses that are on the switch on VLAN 1. Don't look at anything there. That's not what we want. So any host that is in VLAN 4 should have 172.12.4.6 set as its default gateway. I've already done that on the routers. But with our hosts, of course, if we had regular PC hosts, we would need to either configure it manually, which is bad, or DHCP, which is good. But again, your default gateways with router on a stick are always the addresses that are on the router. So let's go ahead and do a little pinging here and see what we can ping. First off, let's go to host 4 and first see if it can ping its own default gateway, which would be 172.12.4.6. And we lost the first ping packet, which is understandable. We sent another one that goes through 100%. It's all good. Now let's see if we can ping router 2's default gateway, which would be 2.6. Goes through beautifully, so that's usually a pretty good sign. Now let's go ahead and see if 4 can ping 2 now, and it can. So everything's looking really good with our configuration. However, we're not going to stop there. Go ahead and do your testing over on router 2. Because if we look at this from host 2's point of view, it should be able to ping 3 different addresses. It should be able to ping its own gateway at 2.6. It ought to be able to ping host 4's gateway at 4.6. And then finally, it should be able to ping host 4 itself. So let's make sure that it can do all of that. No problem pinging its own gateway. No problem pinging 4's gateway. And no problem pinging 4. So at that point, your router on a stick configuration is done. That's really all there is to it. And we're going to go over some values in the next video, just some things to watch out for, and also a few troubleshooting tips. But again, as long as you've got your default gateways on set for the router and you've got your VLAN address space information straight, this works like a charm. It'll be easy points for you on the exam. So I'll see you on the next video, and we'll talk a little bit about things to look for when you're troubleshooting router on a stick.